much you missed when you didn't exist. I am Corbett, and I am 53.
And I'm Lucy, and I'm 24.
That does not rhyme at all.
No. I could do, and I'm saying cheese, but that's
Yeah, I know.
silly.
That's okay. Today we're doing a honorary thing for Black History Month. A little bit.
Whoop, whoop.
Well, it's the end of Black History Month at this point, but it's a short month, so enjoy what you can. And what we're talking about is good times, not just generic times that are good, but the show. There was a television show called Good Times that ran from 1974 to 1979. Was well known for its catchy catchphrase, dynamite! After reading up a lot on the history of it and kind of rewatching some episodes, I have some different feelings now. But as a kid, it was a really confusing show to watch, but still really fun because it was a comedy. It was a comedy about a downtrodden African American family, or a black family at the time, call it that. But they were, an honest, hardworking family that were living in the projects in Chicago. And as a kid, I had no idea how to relate to that because I lived in
Rural Texas.
I lived in rural Texas, and the biggest town that was near me was about 40,000 people. The amount of people that are supposed to be in the building projects that they were in was about 1/4 the total amount of the population of my city, my home city of Tyler.
Wow.
Now it's a lot bigger, of course, because everything's a lot bigger. But it was really, as a kid, I didn't understand, like, what's a project? What's government cheese? What's all these things? Because there were lots of jokes about, government subsidies and stuff that what people were living on. People were trying to get by, and they still do to this point, well, at least so far. But let me take it back a little bit. The show was originally put together with the idea of two characters who showed up on a series called Maude, which you would know Maude. You would know B. Arthur because she is the leader of the Golden Girls.
Oh, you think I know the
Aren't you?
Golden Girls?
I thought you did, so apparently we've got another show to cover. But anyway, Maude got her start from All in the Family, which is another show. So it's a spinoff of a spinoff, and now we're on the third series of spinoffs. In Maude, Florida was the housekeeper for Maude, and Henry was her husband. And he was a firefighter in New York, and she was a housekeeper in New York. This takes place in Chicago. So when they retooled it, they changed it because if he was a firefighter, he would have been a middle American. They wanted to show what it was like on the impoverished end of things.
Okay.
And so he became an unemployed, trying to always get a job and get by. John Amos they renamed Henry Evans to James Evans, and I'm not sure specifically why. It doesntle hurt. But I guess they felt that it needed a different change because he had to have a different tone and feel. And Esther Rolle, I want to say Rolle, Rolle, plays Florida Evans, who is the motherly figure of the show. And they were meant to be the key people that you're focused on in the show. But after the first few episodes, JJ, who was a 26-year-old playing a 17-year-old, but Jimmy Walker was really, really funny. He played JJ. And JJ was an artist who was never getting a lot of luck and having trouble and dealing with things on the street. Thelma was she was a younger sister, but she was the next oldest in line. She was like 16 or something. She was just in high school, and she was a very hardworking student. And Michael was about the same, though he started getting into, Michael was 11, and he was supposed to be, I think he was a pretty diligent student too, but he started getting into activation. He was trying to be an active in the Black American type community, which led to a lot of very complicated issues because they dealt with gang violence and problems in the street, things that, again, rural Texas boy not going to know a lot about. So I learned a lot from it, but also I didn't realize what was really happening. It kind of gave me that sample of, oh, that doesn't seem good at all. They had a neighbor, Willona. Yeah, Willona was a divorcee who lived like upstairs somehow, and she was friends with Florida. And she always made fun of the maintenance guy. He was pretty much synonymous with the show by the end. Nathan Bookman was the name of the character and was typically referred to as Buffalo Butt or Booger later on because he was overweight. Since he ran the building, everything was run down. He was blamed for everything. You kind of get he's the crux of most like bits. But for the most part, it was supposed to be the main couple, Florida and James, kind of dealing with how do we make a payment for rent? How do we keep our kids in school? And he went from job to job because he never had a full education. So he's always pushing you, go to school and get your education because that was like the thing. And he was really frustrated with that because he never had like I think he had a sixth grade education, so he could barely read. And there's a couple episodes where they focus on that. And I think JJ was the same way, where he wasn't very astute, but he was very artistic. There was a specific painting that was put at the end of some of the episodes that was by Ernie Barnes, and he was a prolific African American artist at the time. His painting they showed was a painting called the Sugar Shack,
Mhm.
which was this sort of dance club basically for the time. And it was really, if you've seen it, it's like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. It's very unique, very interesting. And he wasn't just an artist. I looked this up because I found out later on he didn't get into college. He was trying to get into Duke University or the University of North Carolina, and they wouldn't let him in because of segregation. This is back in the 60s
Mhm.
or the 50s, I think. So he wound up going to North Carolina Central University, where he got a scholarship for football. Now, this is the part where it threw me for a loop because then after college, and he got his degree, he was a good artist, but he went off and played for the Colts.
Okay.
Basically the early 60s. Then he played for the New York Titans. Then he played for the Chargers up until about 62. Then he played for the Denver Broncos until 65. And then he joined the Canadian League.
Wow.
So he was a 6'3", 250-pound guy. He was a big guy.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like, wow, this was a really talented artist who was one heck of a football player. It was just interesting. I mean, it was way back in the days when football wasn't quite as big as it was yet, because by the mid 60s was when it started taking off. The Super Bowl became like synonymous with, oh, we got to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But this was a long time ago. Well, for us, it's a long time ago, and it's even before I was born. So there you go. That's when I didn't exist. At the beginning and ending of most of the shows, they showed the projects they lived in, which is called the Cabrini Green Homes, which is a real place in Chicago, which is apparently, I did not know this, infamous for the amount of gang violence and well, gang wars were fought on this turf. I looked up all the history on that, and it used to be like like a tent city at one point where back in the 20s and 30s, the Irish and the Swedish were settled there. And it was called Little Hell because there were gas refineries nearby that would shoot out flames on a regular basis and toxic fumes.
Wow.
Then it became the place where they stuffed the Italians, Little Sicily. And then in the 50s and 60s, they put the projects there, and the projects were the government going in to build housing so the downtrodden and the underpaid could have a home and still go to work, because Chicago needed a workforce, because Chicago had all the factories and stuff going on. It's a big city. It's a massive city. And that's one thing, again, at rural Texas, did not understand that. Like, why would so many people need to be there? Like, how many workers could you need? Lots. The answer is lots. So it really gave me a perspective into the world that I didn't understand. And although as a kid, I didn't 100% get it, and I latched on to dynamite, I found out today, doing the research and looking up the history and everything on it, that Florida and James, John Amos and Esther Roll, were really frustrated with the way the show turned. Because in the first season, it was going to be them as the focus and the kids kind of as the comedy relief. They come in and do something funny or say something snappy, and they have to like, no, 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 don't do that. You do this because we're good people. And that's the thing. They're a family dealing with real problems in a very real world. It's them trying to make money and get ahead for what little they can. And they usually don't. So they were really frustrated that after the first few episodes, it was really obvious that Jimmy Walker's character, JJ, was more popular. And he was kind of pushed as the forward face for the show. This goofy guy who would run around, say his, dynamite catchphrase, and people would laugh at that. And he's a ridiculous fool instead of a real American couple dealing with a problem. So it kind of downfaces the plight of any Black American
Mhm.
or African American or anybody in that situation. Like, well, it's just funny to laugh at poor people. Like, well, it is. I would have no idea. I would have had no concept if it hadn't existed. If it had never been there, I would not know anything and not that I'm saying that the TV show from the 70s is going to teach me everything about what it's like to live in urban Chicago.
Yeah.
But I think it was paramount that you get that out there, because even though he wasn't a great role model, which was John and Esther's point, he's not a great role model for a Black man or Black boy or anybody because he's just a goofball. But he was what attracted anybody to watch the show. Like, oh, he's going to do something silly. And then they got to watch the rest of it and learn the meat of the show because there was always something very complicated. They would deal with abortion and gang violence and the problems of the underprivileged that have to deal with it daily. It was difficult sometimes. You'd watch those shows and like, I have a feeling, but I don't know what it is and I don't know how to deal with it. It's important that those things get out there. So I will say, in the defense of the goofball character, sometimes you need something comical to bring people in to get them to go, oh, I've got to focus on this real problem. And there were a lot of shows in the 70s that were doing that. They would have a funny moment, but they were dealing with real problems or real things that were happening and on a footing that you could see it and tangibly understand it, or at least get an idea, as opposed to, I don't like those things. They don't align with what I like, so we're going to ignore them, because that's terrible.
Yeah.
Pretty sure there was a new show that came out that was Good Times.
It could, maybe.
It's an animated sitcom.
Ooh.
So there was an animated sitcom put out in 2020 on Netflix. So you can
2024.
probably see it. So somewhere in there, there's a Jay Farrow I guess is in it, but Jay Farrow was on Silent Live for quite a while. So, and Nicole Brown. Yvette Nicole Brown was in
Community.
Community.
Yep.
I always like her stuff. So hopefully that's really good. I never saw it. I can't say.
Well,
I
it's
enjoyed.
new. It got released last year, so
Yeah,
you got time.
I got time. I'll pick it up. The show had a lot of break apart moments because, again, the main couple were frustrated. I think Esther was more frustrated and made it much more vocal, and they were going to fire her. And John Amos decided he would just, like, I'm going to go focus on a film career.
Yeah.
So they literally killed his character.
Wow. That's terrible.
Which was a sad episode, if I remember right. The character itself was gone. And then once he was removed, then they had her just leave. She up and married some other guy and moved to Arizona and left them there to kind of man the house, which was kind of weird. And I think it was just odd that the show got reworked a couple times. So like the 4th season to the 6th season was very broken.
Oh, yeah.
That's when the bookman, the janitor, he became much more prominent about that time. They brought in Janet Jackson, who was Penny. She was a runaway who wound up getting adopted by Willona.
Oh, okay.
The upstairs neighbor, so that she had her child. And it was Janet Jackson's big start when she was just a little bitty kid.
Yeah, she would have been really young because she was only born in the 60s, yeah?
Yeah, well, she was like 10 or something, I think. She wasn't like a baby.
Well, yeah, but I know. She was still young.
Well, at the end of the 70s is when this would have probably been. And then they realized the show dropped off pretty dramatically after they killed James, the father.
Yeah.
Which I agree, it was a super downer show because I can't remember if they killed him off and like he went to get gasoline and got shot or something really mundane, but it was something like, he's just gone. And it was super, super depressing. And it was so weird. And Esther kind of felt the same way. She was really pissed. They just up and fired him, and then they made her move. And so the 6th season, they basically, I don't know if they paid her enough or they capitulated to whatever she asked for, but she came back in the 6th season and finished the show. And everybody kind of had their happy ending in the end of it. I think JJ gets his comic book deal, which is weird because he was a painter for so long. Thelma, her fiance / boyfriend, gets signed back on with the Chicago Bears because he had broken knees or something for a long time, and he was kind of laid up and couldn't play.
Oh.
Michael at that point went off to college. It seems like everybody just kind of like, well, everything's good and we're all leaving.
Yeah.
And they all left the projects. So it ended. But I will say, I think the world was better because it was there. I know that John Amos and Esther Roll were really frustrated with the way the show went because it was supposed to be like, this is overcoming adversity and showing what it's like to struggle in a country that you're supposed to be a part of. So I think it was good, even though, yeah, I will admit as a kid, I was there to listen to him go dynamite.
You were there for the laughs and not for the seriousness.
Well, that's the way it needs to be, though. You need a little bit of both.
That's true. I will say a lot of shows have been getting better about that, especially since more issues are welcome to be addressed ish. I know Blackish was the show that came out and everyone was really enjoying it because we just don't see a lot of people of color on television. And so I think maybe Good
Oh, yeah.
Times didn't hit its mark then because it might have been too soon. You were part of reintegration into schools, weren't you?
Yeah.
Like you were the
Yeah.
first year that it happened. Well, not you specifically,
It
but like
wasn't the first year it happened, but I was definitely part of the result of it all. There was still a lot of bitter feelings when I started. How about that?
yeah. And so I think it's unfortunate that the world needed some time to figure that out, but I think now on television, at least some of the shows that I watch, I'd like to think are a bit more open to exploring those social political questions and what ifs and concerns and realities that exist. Like, yeah, Blackish is, I think, still running, or did they finish it off?
I think it's finished actually at this point.
Yeah.
But still, it was a good show. Lawrence Fishburne, which I think Lawrence Fishburne was supposed to be. I was looking through, and I noticed his name popped up as one of the potential cast members when they were casting Good Times. When he
Oh.
was like really young, it would have been interesting if he was in that and then in Blackish too. It would have been
Mhm.
kind of like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's something that made its mark for what it was. So they give you that. And Blackish definitely, I think they did a pretty good job of it. It still keeps with the idea that like they're dealing with problems on a higher end. Like he's still like that family is an upper middle class or possibly even lower upper class
Yeah.
family, and they're still dealing with racial issues. Now granted, I will admit part of it is because the main character in that was always kind of triggering them.
Yeah.
What do you mean black? And I'm like, well, I don't know what's going on. It's still relevant. It still had pertinence to what was happening, and it points up an idea in your head at least to go, oh, I didn't understand what they're going through. I didn't know
Yeah.
because I'm on the outside and I'm not readily available. Again, rural Texas does not prepare you for everything else in the world.
Well,
Sorry.
same goes for rural Wyoming.
Very true.
Yeah. Like you just don't know what's going on in the world until you go and experience it. And most people are scared to experience it because they're worried the worst is going to happen. And
Mm,
sometimes it does, but I would say most of the time you just exist and not expect the best out of people, but most people are nice. People are nice until they have something happen and then they have a bad day.
yeah, it's very true.
I think we're entering an era in society where we can start to kind of address more of these issues. And I mean we've seen it more with television and film, especially with more inclusive television and film, so that way you can kind of see what the world is like outside of whatever bubble or world you live in. And I think that we're getting better for it, but I also think we might be heading into some more stereotype territory.
Well, there's stereotypes there for a certain amount of it to be true. You
Yeah.
know, there's certain stereotypes like, well, yeah, I guess. But at the same time, to make fun of somebody just because is not always right. I think you've kind of dealt with some levels of that on your own.
Yeah.
Just you have a lot of underprivileged kids in your classes.
Yeah. Title One schools in the big city, different experiences.
Well, hopefully you're giving them the best opportunities and teaching them as best you can.
Yeah.
But it's rough on them. You know, kids don't know. They're not working a job yet. They're not dealing with it yet.
No,
But it's getting there.
this is true. But I think Good Times probably would have been better appreciated if it was put out now, probably. But I think it was a good kind of start to make way for some of those African American actors.
Well, yeah. I mean, it gave them breaks that they definitely could use, and it was a full, like all black cast. There was no. I mean, there were white people and Hispanic people showing up in it, but they were usually just walk on roles or moments where something would happen or special guests. It was very rare to see an all black cast at that time. I think
Hmm.
I don't remember too many. Any of the Jeffersons, I guess, would be the other. But see, again, that was a black family living the high end, and that's the comedy,
Yeah.
which is a little weird to go, oh, because it's funny because they don't have money. Like, we shouldn't be doing that, should we? Maybe. Well, maybe. It was fine. We'll talk about that one somewhere down the road too, I'm sure.
Yep.
Anyway, so we've solved all the problems, and there's no more racism. Good. Mission accomplished.
Happy Black History Month.
Yep. Everybody, this has been what? So, everybody, my goodness.
Jeez.
This has been what you missed when you didn't exist. And I guess look for the good times.
Don't mean nothing but a good time. Not the theme, but
not the theme song.
it's okay.